Greetings and welcome back to another episode of the Daily Run, and today we're playing as The Lost. The Lost so far has had to be one of the characters which has had the most unfortunate dailies to date. And when I say unfortunate, I really mean that he's had some of the most difficult dailies that you have to face. Maybe the most annoying dailies is the good way to put it. Just starting on the cellar is already bad enough because there's so many spiders, they split up and they have a ton of HP and they just move unpredictably. But they kind of top it all off, we are facing Envy in our first room, and facing Envy is probably one of the most excruciating experiences you have to do as any character, especially in the first floor. There's so many segments you have to hit, you have to avoid, especially as the Lost. You can't really afford to get hit even twice, and it just pulls you on tilt. It kind of gives you a little anxiety attack, and you're just kind of forced in this position where you don't really want to be. To top it off, we fought the Haunt, which is again one of the most annoying bosses you can probably fight. Not even the Haunt itself, but more like his little haunts, the little ghosts that he spews out. Especially when there's two of them, they can be very hard or even sometimes impossible to dodge if they get you in a corner. And it just creates this weird feeling regarding the Lost, which feels, at least on this daily, like something like the game doesn't want you to win. Of course, this is kind of excavated by the fact that we fought Monstro in a small room, which is also one of the most annoying room layouts that you can possibly face. But nevertheless, we did manage to kind of come out on top. We didn't die, and we did kind of face our troubles. We beat them, and we were rewarded. We got Mom's Knife in our Devil Deal, which should definitely help us going forward. The next thing I really want to focus on, maybe I didn't really talk about it, but I do a thing that not a lot of people do with the Lost, and I enter sacrifice rooms. Sacrifice rooms, in my opinion, are a very good way to get yourself killed. Just because if you get in there, especially since Afterbirth Plus, there's a lot of sacrifice room layouts, which are just much more tedious and just much harder to actually navigate. Like in this case example, there was a small sacrifice room with one big spider, and I'm sure if I didn't have Mom's Knife, there's a good chance I would get hit. And when you get hit in a sacrifice room as the Lost, that means you lose your Holy Mantle, which means you can't exit it again. I call this the walk of shame, or maybe the limbo of shame, because you're in a situation where you're not dead yet, but it's inevitable, and you know that you're going to die, and you know that you did this to yourself. And to kind of top it all off, you have to kill yourself by exiting the cursed room, or just quitting the run, I guess, if you're not brave enough. And it's a situation that not a lot of people should really get into, and like I said, I wouldn't recommend it. Going to sacrifice rooms, I think, is a big mistake as the Lost, unless maybe you have a teleport card or something like that, kind of a secondary way to get out, because then even, if you don't get hit, you can still exit with the Holy Mantle, and you can keep your teleport card for maybe another sacrifice room, or maybe if there's a bad situation, you can still teleport out and not get killed that way. Nevertheless, I think sometimes that you can get lucky, and I usually go for the glory play. I think it's much more fun to play the game a bit riskier, and you never know, maybe you find an item like 9 lives, maybe even a guppy item, any damage items, some of them exist, and maybe even goat head, you never can get too lucky with this. And especially I think on Lost dailies, you really need to go for that variance play, because in most cases, if you really want to complete boss rush and hush, but if you're playing just as the Lost without a really powerful run, or maybe just as a respawn character, you're not gonna be able to do much. So kind of powering yourself through and just really going for all the possible options you have is a very important decision, in my opinion at least, just because, like I said, the variance is high, and I think you really need to be strong to tackle those challenges and just have a really good score in the end as well. With that said, this daily didn't really turn out, at least not that well in sacrifice room regard, but what did happen is we found Sackboy in our shop, and Sackboy probably has to be one of the top items that you can find naturally in the shop. It just allows you to get it just opens the door to so many possibilities. If you have any active items, there's so many battery charges, you can actually spam them, you can break the game with it, you just get a ton of consumables. So in that regard, we're very much set. And with the Lost, there's actually a pretty good strategy if you can amass enough battery charges, that you keep re-rolling yourself with the D4 until eventually you get a respawn item. And it can be any respawn item. The important part is that you get back as a character that can actually have more than 0 health, or I guess half a heart. And when you respawn as that other character, then of course you amass more hearts, and what you can do then even is start rolling again until eventually you get a really strong run. And that's exactly what I did here, and having that little HUD on the right which shows me the items is really helpful, because what doesn't really happen with the Lost, you don't get the indicator that you have an additional life like you do with other characters. It's just empty where that's supposed to be. So having an overview of the items that you actually have in your inventory gives you an indication if you can actually revive. And I think I got the Ankh, and when you die as the Ankh, whatever, you respawn as Blue Baby, and at that point I thought that was good enough. There's really no point going forward and rerolling more times until you get, for example, Dark Judas, because as soon as we actually get out of it as Blue Baby, we can start rerolling again and then hopefully get a really good run. I got a run with Quad Shot and Tech Hex and I think some damage ups, and I decided, that's probably good enough to kind of complete the run from that point on. I was going for Guppy as well. We obviously, when you start kind of rerolling your items, you get a ton of transformations all in all, and that really does help or maybe boost the power of your run. But in general, what the real transformation, or maybe the only transformation we're gunning for, is Guppy. We didn't really get lucky enough to get it, but nevertheless the run was strong enough to just carry itself on its own 2 feet, and we were in a very comfortable position from that spot on. What's great about transformations is that sometimes they can allow you to get certain benefits that maybe you wouldn't get with other items. In this case, I think we got both the Beelzebub and the Seraphim transformation, and that gives you flight. And having some passive flight to go along with a strong run is a great thing, because it does allow you to dodge creep, which I think is maybe the biggest benefit, but it also allows you to get some maybe consumables which you wouldn't get otherwise, and it's just easier to navigate, especially when you have Spectral and Piercing Tears to navigate over rocks. It just makes the whole thing much faster. The thing is, when you actually spend some time rerolling yourself and just kind of collecting battery charges, you do waste a lot of time just doing that, and I think we were at like 14 or maybe 15 minutes at the 4th floor, which means we had 2 more floors to actually complete. And in that position, you maybe feel like you're not fast enough, but just because we have this strong run, we kind of can rely on that and just kind of power through all of the rest of the floors. Sure, maybe we skip a room or 2, but in general, I don't think I've skipped too much, maybe some secret rooms or second secret rooms, but all in all, it was a good sign of a very strong run. You can see that now we're in a position where we don't really have to worry about our damage anymore. Maybe our tear rate is a bit low, and our tear rate is somewhat important with Tech Hex. Tech Hex has this very annoying property that it doesn't really scale the damage with how much you charge it. Like with any other item, you would expect the longer you charge it for, the more damage it does, but in the case of Tech Hex, the only difference that happens is that your rings get bigger. And obviously bigger rings are good in some situations, they stay on the enemy for much longer, for example Harsh, and when you have something like homing crots, like I had Telepathy for Dummies in this case, it's also good because it allows the bends or maybe the lasers to bend more and then stay on the enemy for a bit longer, and that does more damage in return. But in the case of Tech Hex, to kind of maximize the damage, you really need to rely on just shooting fast and just shooting a lot of little rings, or maybe you don't really need to rely on it, but that's the way to get maximum DPS out of this item. And with having 22 or maybe even 24 tier delay, you can't really do that, because even the smallest charge maybe takes 2 seconds or so. Thankfully, like I said, we do have 4 shots, which essentially means that our damage is quadrupled. And what's great is if you can manage, or maybe when you clear a room and go into the next one, as you charge, your rings do get naturally bigger. And the thing is, when you shoot these 4 shots, because they're so big, they get constrained in the width of the room, so to say, which means that they really don't kind of travel outward, but that the lasers are somewhat clustered together and they do deal significantly more damage that way. So that was maybe a good thing that we were going for here, and maybe I'm analyzing it a bit too much, because we're already at a Mega Satan, and not Mega Satan, just regular Satan. Overall, you can see that this run actually went really decently. We are at 42,000 points before even beating Satan, and this was a run that only went to Shoal. And Shoal on the hard mode, sure, because it's hard mode, we did naturally get a little more points. Our damage penalty wasn't that high because we were playing as the Lost most of the case, which means that we didn't really take damage, and the rest was just kind of coup de grace. It was a very nice run, at least from the point where we started rerolling, and it was one of those dailies or maybe strategies that makes you realize that Lost isn't a good character, at least not for dailies. Just because having the D4 means you have so many opportunities to actually reroll into a better run, or maybe a run where you can actually have health, and when you can get health, obviously that's so much superior to just not having health. Even if you maybe have flight and the Holy Mantle, it's not worth it to kind of keep that in vain from what you could have as the run, in this case Tech Hex and Quad Shot. Nevertheless, this was a very decent daily for us. Obviously we did get a bit lucky, 45,000 points, and the rank was 47th. I think on Gridbot, without the cheaters, I was 15th, which is a decent run. I really want to get in the top 10s again, or maybe sometime soon, because I think that's where the real cake lies. But for now, I'm satisfied with what this is, and maybe this daily was a bit more RNG based and maybe it was more unlucky and lucky for some, but that's how Isaac goes. I hope you enjoyed this one, guys, and I hope to see you next time.